Every day, trillions of dollars in global liquidity search for a home. Today, this massive current hits a newly engineered fork in the road. On one side is the U.S. Treasury. Their objective is clear: extend the dollar's reach abroad while ensuring structural demand for short-term U.S. debt. Partnered with them is the Federal Reserve. They need to keep high-velocity monetary activity inside a controllable perimeter, governed by anti-money laundering and sanctions laws. Treasury-backed payment stablecoins serve these goals perfectly. By backing digital dollars with short-maturity T-bills, they export dollar dominance while automatically generating demand for U.S. sovereign debt. Bitcoin, however, does neither. It competes as a non-sovereign money, and holding it creates zero structural demand for United States borrowing. This presents a distinct problem for the state. They need to manage an open, decentralized monetary network, but an outright technological ban is impossible. The solution is not prohibition. It is the systematic engineering of asymmetric friction. Policymakers can construct a smooth, unobstructed pipeline for compliant digital dollars, while placing a turbulent, obstructed maze in front of Bitcoin. This strategy operates on two distinct fronts: applying heavy tax friction to Bitcoin as a daily currency and exploiting structural choke points within its underlying network. Hostile bans only push innovation into the shadows. By applying soft power friction, the state maintains global dollar hegemony and keeps its monetary adversaries exactly where it can see them. The proposed Genius Act regulatory regime offers a glimpse into how this channeling works. Under this framework, payment stablecoins are required to hold one-to-one reserves, limited strictly to cash, short maturity treasuries of 93 days or less, and overnight repos. Meet those strict reserve requirements, and the state lets your capital flow freely through the fully regulated system. This is a dual-column matrix comparing the regulatory treatment of Genius-compliant stablecoins against Bitcoin. Compliant stablecoins are rewarded with a clear path to federal licensing, deep integration with the traditional banking sector, and immediate relevance in global payment systems. Bitcoin faces a very different reality. The state maintains its strict classification as property or a commodity for tax purposes. Because of this classification, every single everyday spend, whether buying a car or a cup of coffee, triggers capital gains reporting requirements for the user. Add in stringent broker reporting rules like Form 1099-DA, and the paperwork burden for using Bitcoin as cash becomes overwhelmingly heavy. Policymakers reinforce this friction with a very specific narrative. They promote stablecoins as the safe, modern digital dollar for remittances. Bitcoin is deliberately cast as a volatile investment, or simply digital gold. This framework even allows for a strategic Bitcoin reserve. The state can hold seized Bitcoin as a strategic reserve asset without ever endorsing it for circulation. By ensuring that buying a coffee with Bitcoin is a tax nightmare, the state strips away its utility as a daily currency, directing all everyday transaction velocity straight into treasury-backed stablecoins. Controlling the money is only half the strategy. Controlling the network is harder, because forcing a decentralized protocol into a hard fork via state mandate is technologically impossible. This is a network graph mapping Bitcoin's distributed nodes. Visually, it presents an image of perfect decentralization, with thousands of independent participants keeping the ledger secure. But when you peel back the physical nodes to look at the software development, you find that the actual maintenance of Bitcoin Core relies on fewer than 50 regular code contributors. Because the protocol has no built-in treasury to pay these developers, this small group is entirely dependent on a highly concentrated set of external funding vehicles. That capital flows through a very specific set of intermediaries. Nonprofits and grant programs like OpenSats and Brink act as the primary pipelines keeping the maintainers funded. The ultimate source of this capital is heavily weighted toward corporate entities with large U.S. footprints and institutional consortiums, names like Block, Fidelity, and BlackRock. Regulators do not need to ban the code. They simply exert baseline compliance pressure on these U.S.-facing corporate funders. Through preferential grants and research partnerships, that institutional capital can quietly bias developer priorities, favoring features that improve auditability and compliance tooling over unconstrained privacy. Meanwhile, by maintaining selective regulatory ambiguity around privacy tools and mixers, regulators create a chilling effect. The small pool of active maintainers is forced to internalize that legal risk before writing or approving controversial code. While the base layer remains open, the corporate control over the funding of the protocol's architects defines the network's actual regulatory attack surface. The same soft power dynamics apply to the physical layer of the network. The hardware itself requires a massive, globally distributed deployment of energy and machines. There is a popular narrative that everyone runs their own node and mines solo, but the economic reality is dominated by mining pools. This is a pie chart of global block production data. It shows a severe concentration of power. Routinely, just 3 pools, Foundry USA, Antpool, and F2 Pool, control over 50 to 60% of recent blocks. This concentration exposes the technical distinction between the thousands of hashers providing raw computing power and the handful of pool operators who actually construct the block templates. Template construction is the ultimate choke point. The operator building the template is the one dictating exactly which transactions are allowed into the ledger and which are ignored. Because major pools like Foundry are U.S. domiciled entities, they are fully subject to the Office of Foreign Assets Control and standard anti-money laundering obligations. Regulators can mandate or simply expect template-level filtering of sanctioned addresses by leaning on just a handful of these pool operators. They don't need the individual hashers to comply. Decentralized minor sovereign protocols like Ocean's Datum and Stratum v2 do exist, allowing individual hashers to restore local control over their own templates. However, these sovereign setups account for only a small single-digit percentage of the hash rate. Policy ensures they stay marginalized by keeping the compliance burden high for independent operators, making the monitored, pool-mediated route the path of least resistance. The mining hardware is undeniably decentralized across the globe. But the software logic dictating the ledger remains highly centralized, providing a convenient, actionable backdoor for state sanctions. Total protocol capture is a technical impossibility. The strategy relies instead on surrounding the network with an inescapable, regulated periphery. This diagram illustrates the macro-structural model of the state's strategy. The Bitcoin base layer sits untouched at the bottom, but encapsulating it is a thick, glowing ring of compliance barriers at the exchanges, the mining pools, and the code funders. Right above it, a wide open highway allows stablecoins to flow freely. At the transactional level, aggressive tax friction ensures that any high-velocity fiat looking to enter the crypto space is systematically funneled into treasury-backed stablecoins. At the infrastructure level, the edges of Bitcoin, where the code is funded and the blocks are constructed, are successfully pressured into baseline compliance. The geopolitical result is highly effective. International users seeking dollar exposure are steered toward licensed USD stablecoins, actively expanding dollar hegemony without the U.S. ceding monetary control. Policymakers know that aggressively suppressing Bitcoin further would backfire. It would simply drive this highly visible, actionable periphery offshore, costing the U.S. its regulatory oversight. By engineering asymmetric friction at these specific choke points, a sovereign state can secure global demand for its debt and contain decentralized money. And they can do it all without altering a single line of consensus code.